Good morning, one and all. I am Shloka Kulkarni and I will be your host for the day along with Megatrends, powerful, transformative that could change the global economy, business, and society. Megatrends have been changing the way we live since centuries now. Highlighting on such an insightful topic, we have our very first session themed Visualizing Megatrends, moderated by Mr. T.K. Srirang, the National Secretary and Board Member of NHRDN and the Group CHRO of ICICI Bank. T.K. Srirang is the member of the Advisory Council of IIT Bombay. He has 25 years of rich and glorious work experience at various huge organizations. I request Mr. Srirang to please introduce our chief guest for the session and take the session forward. Over to you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Srirang.
Thank you so much, Shloka. Everything is difficult until it becomes easy, goes the old adage. The pivot between difficult to easy is often tireless efforts and an audacious mentor who believes in your ability to achieve even the difficult. It is this tremendous belief in human potential and abilities that our distinguished guest, Mr. K.V. Kamath, has displayed and has created a galaxy of prominent leaders in the banking and finance domain within the country. There are numerous instances wherein people have been pleasantly surprised as to how much they could achieve following the vision of Mr. K.V. Kamath than what they themselves would have imagined. Today, it is indeed my honor and privilege to welcome Mr. Kamath, who is popularly known as the Change Maestro. Most of us know Mr. Kamath as the erstwhile chairman of ICCF Bank and Infosys. He is amongst the most respected business leaders who transformed the way India does banking and for pioneering many technology innovations in the field. As the MD CEO of ICICI Bank, he is credited to have transformed a developmental finance institution into one of the largest technology-led banks in the country. Mr. Kamath is an eternal optimist who deeply believes in the potential of India and has always thought big, a philosophy which is still reflected in the size and scale of operations of the entire ICICI group. After completing his engineering studies, Mr. Kamath graduated from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad in 1971 and started his career with ICICI in project finance. He then set up several of ICICI's new businesses as well as handling general management positions. In 1988, Mr. Kamath joined Asian Development Bank in Manila. Mr. Kamath returned to India in May 1996 to take over as Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer at ICICI, which later merged with ICICI Bank. Mr. Kamath was conferred the Padma Bhushan, one of India's highest civilian honors, in 2008. He has received widespread recognition internationally and in India, including being named CNBC's Asian Business Leader in 2001, Businessman of the Year by Forbes Asia, Business Leader of the Year by Economic Times India in 2007. Mr. Kamath has been the president of Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, the country's apex industry association, and co-chair of the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos. Mr. K.V. Kamath till recently was the first president of the new development bank set up by BRICS countries, a job for which he was handpicked by the government. During the pandemic, he was invited by the Reserve Bank of India to head a committee on restructuring of loans impacted by COVID-19. Mr. Kamath is currently the chairman of National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, a statutory institution set up by the Government of India to catalyze investments for the enormous infrastructure development that the country still needs. Ladies and gentlemen, with these few words, with great pride and honor, I welcome the leader, a beacon of India's financial world, and who in many ways continues to influence the economic blueprint of our nation. Mr. K.V. Kamath for the inaugural address. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Srirang. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to join the 24th conference of the National HR DN. The theme chosen is apt. And not only is it apt, it is right, because you could have themes at various points in time, but for today's time, the theme is just right. What is the theme? Meta, mega, me, mine. I would think that in in my career, in the early parts of my career, I saw me and mine happen. I think mega is a work in process, but meta is something very new. So to put it in context and say that we are looking at meta, mega, me and mine is very apt. And of course, this leads to what I would call the metamorphosis of HR. I will just put a side comment here that to me, the metamorphosis of HR probably started in the 90s. Why do I say that? Because if you look at two large employers, employing industries came on the scene during that period of time. That is, a new financial sector started blossoming in the mid 90s, becoming a very large employer, as it were, with new skill sets, and which again, new skill sets to be learned by HR. Simultaneously, you had what I would call the technology revolution start, and employment generation happened there with, I would say, recruitment like never before. Ticket sizes of 25 to 50,000 per year. Even in banking, we saw ticket size of 10, 15. But if you look at technology, the ticket size were very much higher. So the metamorphosis of HR really started about 20 years back, and it continues unabated. I will add to meta, mega, me, and mine, and this will be a recurring theme through what I talk today. What I call the new, a few new elements which are clearly driving several things that are happening. And these are what I call the 6 Ds. That is demographic, democratic, dematerialized, digital, disruptive, and demonetized. I will explain this as we go along because all these weave into the fabric of an enterprise, and indeed they weave into the fabric of HR itself, because it is around these that I would think a seventh D gets added, and that is disruption. And we are all living in the disrupted world, and HR has to be at the forefront to look at what I would call, if at all necessary, orderly disruption. Ideally, avoid disruption. If at all that's not possible, then orderly disruption. So that seventh D becomes important. But let me elaborate on these 6 drivers as I see. Demographic, we understand conventionally, but I'm talking of demographic in this context as cutting across all sorts of assumptions of age and so on. Because age is now no bar, whether it is a young person who you want to recruit, either drop out from college but has skills which your trained set doesn't have. I think in the technology world we see this more and more on an everyday basis. The large global tech firms saying that we are happy to receive dropouts, and we will actively recruit from that core. Other key here is you also have people who have dropped out of the formal education system to set up their own businesses, and they succeeded remarkably well. And we first saw them in the global context. There are at least 2, 3 big names. The biggest tech names all come with that cachet, as it were, did not complete their school or college education. We see that in India. Again, I won't go into names, but who have successfully built businesses, and I would say built businesses with positive cash flows, unlike several others who have gone through the schooling process and are still running businesses with no cash flows. So you see that is a new demographic cut that comes in, which we need to be conscious as we go along. At the same time, in this new demographic, you have older people who have learned to manipulate technology. So, whereas the conventional mindset was to say that, well, our customer base is those in the 30-35 age group, I think companies will now stretch it and say our customer base now extends to 65 to 70. Of course, my question to them is why not 80? I think that metamorphosis is happening. So the demographic as we knew it is no more the demographic. A new demographic equation has to be put in place by, I think, every HR leader to drive its own business. Then comes democratic. What is democratic in this context? It has nothing to do with politics. By democratic, I mean it becomes ubiquitous, it becomes available to everybody. A good example is the global phone connectivity and the growth in terms of what it enables you to do. And got accelerated by dropping data costs, which made it again affordable, and what I would term as the rise of the lay user. That is, a common man as a user of a device, which otherwise just 10, 15 years back was exclusive domain of people who could afford it. Today it is democratized, and it has a whole lot of implications to everything that you do. It is today dematerialized, the third D that I talked about. Smartphone does the job of 10 other devices. I won't go into all the devices that it does. It's just there on your phone, and you can all it enables you to do. With just 3, 4 years back, you needed those other devices. So what has happened? All those have dematerialized into one device which allows you to do work. And all this has enormous implications to the workplace. Of course, there's one other area of dematerialization which I think all of you are at the center, and all of you had to deal with in the last 2 years. And I would say you took the lead in this area, and that is the whole work from home ethic. So to me, dematerialization also is a part. The work from home ethic is a part of this process where your office has got dematerialized, and it is work from wherever you are, which has come to the fore. I then said digital and disruptive. I think it is well understood, and I won't go into it, but we understand the phraseology very well. And then we have demonetized. And again, this is nothing to do with the demonetization exercise that was run. I'm talking of demonetization as in what can be best termed as asset light models. Think Uber, think Airbnb, think Amazon, and think WeWork. WeWork, I think, should be very close to an HR professional because that links in with the work from anywhere type of concept, and probably at a significantly lower cost. There are other aspects here which I'm sure the team, the 1,000+ people who are on this call today, are absorbed with, because there are issues that impact culture and so on when bonding, culture, so on, when you work from home. But I think by and large, we have learned to adapt to a new normal, a new equilibrium as we go along. And as I said earlier, mega, me, mine has happened. Meta is yet to happen. Of course, the people who are trying to rush it, it will happen in due course. What exact context and shape it will take, I think we will know in due course. There's no need to rush into it. At the meantime, we keep an eye on what is happening there. And these 6 Ds, as I said, are dictating what we do in every space. And these, to me, then provide what I would call the backdrop to the mega trends and scenarios which I think my hosts asked me to broadly touch upon today. And within that, they gave a few touch points, as it were. They said geopolitical. I will look at it as geo and political, two different phrases. They asked me to look at climate and a few other areas. I'll put it under a broad heading ESG. And then again, there are mega disruptions happening in a couple of other areas which you touched upon, which I want to cover. That is mega disruptions in the financial sector, mega disruptions in the technology sector, indeed mega disruptions in every sector that the professionals actually cover. And of course, there was a mention of the impact of soft capital and so on. But I will briefly touch on these areas because I would think that the impact of these will be seen in the next few years. But what I mentioned earlier, it is on us and it is clearly driving everything we do. And there is one other area which is not in there, but I want to cover. That is HR in this new paradigm. This whole paradigm is changed. The trends that you have spotted, the 6 Ds that I have talked about, this whole paradigm is changed, and it is changing, I think, HR in a never before way. I said it 25 years back as we were scaling up ICICI and then ICICI Bank, but I say it again because HR is driving a new paradigm like never before. And I'm sure as HR professionals, You all are on top of it and at the forefront of it. And honestly, you are needed to drive this as we go along. Quickly coming back to the trends, the geo trends. I think these are the global trends that we have seen in the last 2 years in particular. They were happening, and some of them got accelerated at a pace which we never thought would happen. I think the first one that happened, the trend that I see is learning to live with the pandemic or the endemic. I won't elaborate on that. 6, 8 months I have talked about it, but we now have all realized what this means, how we have re-engineered our workspaces, how we have re-engineered our office spaces, and getting to deal with this, and at the same time, getting on with our job, as it were. Related to this is coping with uncertainties, because this brings in heightened uncertainties to the table, and we have learned to deal with these uncertainties as we go along, build them into the norm, as it were, and do business. The third is, I think, an important aspect which in the past took a very long time, and we would say that this doesn't change. What doesn't change? The mind. So resetting the mind was the most difficult part, I would think, of HR professionals' life. But here, reset of the mind happened in a blink. I will share the first time I heard, the inability of the mind to change through an HR professor. It goes back 25 years. C.K. Prahlad was running a class for about 30 CEOs of from corporate India. All the top companies were there, and I was there along with a former CEO and my former boss, Mr. Vagul. C.K. Prahlad, for one session, brought in a professional, a professor of behavioral science. Some of you may know him, Professor Wayne Brockbank. So Wayne asked 3 questions to this group of 30 top Indian CEOs. How volatile is the environment? Imagine today, how volatile is it on a 10-point scale? This is 96, 97, middle of the entire opening up process and people getting battered left, right, and center. Same situation today, how volatile it is on a 10-point scale. The 30 CEOs said 10. Next question, again, an HR question. How competent is your organization? How competent are the people in the organization? Don't we ask that question today in the context of volatility and so on? The answer from the 30 CEOs was 1 to 10, 10 being top, maybe 8.5, somewhere there. So is that you are telling me that your volatility is 10 and your human competence is 8.5. You need to do something about it. Fine. The third question was a real interesting one. The third question was same 10-point scale. What is the ability of your organization to change, to pivot, to change course, and so on? I was just about little less than a year into the organization, and I was struggling for an answer. And as were the 30 CEOs, the first 2 answers came, off the bat, as it were. This one, people started thinking. Somebody said 6, 7, 8. Nobody really said 8. They hesitated. Somewhere around 7. I thought that I say that I was running in just started to run, and headwinds there, and all the changes we had to do. We were 4. So I, very hesitatingly said 4. And, Mr. Vagul took my hand and said, I think we are better than that. We are probably 6 or 7. So I told Mr. Vagul that, sir, that was the organization you ran. The organization I am running and the disruptions that are happening and are possible, I find that change is not happening. So I gave this example because at that point in time, the collective, the CEO set of 30 top CEOs, I think came to a conclusion that the ability to change was maybe 6 or 6.5 on a 10-point. Now comes the interesting part. If that ability was 6.5 and challenge was 10, how do you manage in that sort of a situation? Imagine if today, in the context of all that is happening, the ability of your organization to change was that 6 or 6.5, where would we have been? We would have gotten into a disaster spot very long back. That is why I say that what a key thing that has happened in this mega trend is mindsets have got reset in a blink. So I think we have overcome one major hurdle in either a behavioral context or an HR context. That is the long time that it takes for people to accept change, embrace it, and implement it. I think it happened in a blink. Of course, this mega trend also caused job losses. I won't go into that. All of you have experienced it. Of course, this mega trend meant that you had to teach new skills and jobs to your people. I think that is something that, in at least ICICI, I was saying all along, that it is good for us to say that we are obsolete every year. And every year we take, let us say, 6 days of training, not necessarily in areas that we know, but in completely unrelated areas, so that we are up to date. So I think in the context of today, with all the changes that are happening, we will need to get reskilling and new skilling as it were done on a continuous basis. One key mega trend I see is productivity gain. Nobody talks about it, but all of you know, post-pandemic, what percentage of your staff came back. But even with that lower percentage of staff who's back on the job, as it were, you are producing at 100%. How did this happen? In simple terms, as I look at it, that is productivity increase. Do I have any other verification for this? Indeed, yes. You look at your balance sheets, and I've been tracking quarterly balance sheets over the last 2 years. I see that quarterly balance sheets, the profitability is growing by 25% year on year, steadily for the last. Where has this come? I think predominantly through productivity gains, through people, processes, and induction of technology. As I mentioned earlier, this has been driven by unprecedented technological change, unprecedented speed of adoption, consequent to this mindset getting reset. Again, complete metamorphosis in payment systems, transaction platforms, delivery platforms. And again, if sometimes we don't take it into context, all through the initial years that we were driving technology in the bank, we looked at Moore's law as something very critical for us, where we said the price performance ratio increase at a square every 2 years, and of course that allowed you to grow at dramatic pace. But when you hear about the price performance improvement in AI, Moore's law actually pales. In AI, my friend Vishal Sikka was telling me that the price performance is doubling every 3.4 months. We're not talking of years; it's doubling. So you compound it for a year. We are near about a 10x improvement in price performance every year. So imagine your organization, HR, set of people with new minds which are ready to get reset, AI coming in, and what all this allows you to do. Of course, along with this, in a your sense, there is economic upheaval. I won't go into that. Part of it was pandemic. Part of it is consequent to some of the events that is happening around us today. Let's not go into it at this point. It'll take me a long time to cover this. And we have global inflation as a consequence. We will have to deal with as a mega trend as we go along. And an interesting question that comes here, I will drop this as a thought in mega trends, is global inflation 8%, US 8%, Europe. Interest rates still at 2% in US and maybe a little over zero in Europe. Where are all the pundits who used to teach us that your interest rates are behind the curve in terms of your inflation? When say inflation was 6% and our government bond was at 5.5%, or inflation was at 6.5%, bond was 6%. Where are all the pundits? I'm not blaming them. I'm saying a new economic lesson may have to be written as we go along. I said I will briefly touch on the other drivers. I'm not going to delve into it, being conscious of time. ESG is going to be a key driver as we go along, a trend which is irreversible. And I think we need to embrace that very clearly. Within this, there is a social responsibility in a very wide context. There is environment, again, in a very wide context. And the thought that green is good and competitive. A few years back, green was good. Green was not yet competitive. But you look at what has happened in the 10 years. 10 years back, when you looked at green power, for example, we said that the cost of green power will be upwards of 10 rupees, probably 12 rupees per unit cost of generation. Because the installed cost per megawatt of power at that time was maybe 15 crores. Installed cost per megawatt of power is now down to probably something like 3 crores, and green power per unit cost probably 2 rupees or less than that. So green is now not only good, green is eminently competitive. And this is going to happen as we go into newer green areas like hydrogen and beyond. The equality in the ESG context, I think, is going to happen at a very rapid pace as gender balance gets neutralized, and you work in a way which you are working on with no biases at all, and the way overall equilibrium is found in terms of equality of opportunity, as it were. And as this is happening, the disruptions are happening at a great pace. So this was basically the geo disruptors and tech disruptors that were happening. Again, when I said use the word democratic, affordable, cost drop, I think this is something that we will have to look at in the technology context. A startup today is no longer at a disadvantage. Earlier on, we used to say a barrier to entry for a startup was high technology cost. That is no longer so. We start by asking, free mein kya milta hai? So basically, you start by asking that question. I'll give a small anecdote here. When we were setting up the BRICS Bank, I actually told a colleague, and the first platform that I wanted was an HR platform. Honestly, I'm saying this because people were at the heart of everything. It's been the heart of everything that I have done. And without that, we could not have done anything that we did. And here also we said that. So I said, and I don't want to spend money. So we do a Google search, the top 10 cloud-based HR platforms. A simple search, I did that search myself. The top of the list was a company called Bamboo HR, and there were some 3 or 4 companies. Now, if you do a search, an Indian company comes up there, and I believe it is as good or better than Bamboo HR. So anyway, a Bamboo HR, and then I told a colleague, again, a non-HR person, just see how easy this is. He said, it's very easy. It's simple and straightforward. Then I asked some of my colleagues in ICS's HR, guys, can you benchmark this for me? They did the benchmark. You know what it cost us? It cost us less than $8,000 to actually put the system. It was a per user based system, and that system is still running to date. I'll close the anecdote with we had, because we had large number of applications coming in from young professionals who wanted to join the bank all around the BRICS countries. So I had one of these HR global recruiting firms implant in the office, in our office implanted there. And the person who was heading that desk came in and told me one day that, Mr. Kamal, this platform is far more sophisticated than what we are using in our office. And this is one of the global, the largest recruiting platforms. And I'm paying all of a few, sundry dollars as it were. So you can imagine what technology does in every area, including your own area. And technology is a disruptor. Quickly, in the financial sector, we are seeing disruption happening as part of the trend. The phrase digitech, I won't go into it. Again, no or low entry barrier, virtually no entry barrier. Rapid scale up, you're already seeing it in the broking business. You're starting to see it in the AMC business. It's starting to be seen at the insurance business, more visible in what's called neobanks. We will not go into it today, but in course of time, all these will be words that will no longer be buzzwords, but something that we will have to look at it. And what is the common thread? Low-cost tech is the common thread in all these things. Social networks will exert enormous influence as we go along, and indeed, soft power and will become the spheres of influence. Again, not for today, for another, because I want to conclude by talking about your area, and I got maybe just about a minute to do that. And this I will put under broad heading. I said, and HR in a new paradigm. What is the key in this new paradigm as I see? I have always looked, when I started in 96 as CEO, that HR is a continuum for me. CEO and HR in a continuum. And I used to spend about 25% of my time with HR. If you look at, if I look at my breakup of my time, I think once that organization got scaled up, the time came down. But given all that is happening, I think you need to find 25% of the time with the CEO, and if necessary, you need to educate the CEO that he has to be a partner of HR in all that is happening. So that's why I use the phrase the CEO and the HR continuum. And today, if it was 25% at that time, 25 years back, I'm sure it is going to be much higher today. And you cannot afford periodic interactions. These have to be continuous engagement to strategize, course correct, think something completely different, change, pivot, and so on, you will have to be a key part of this. And the CEO will have to engage with HR in this area. Of course, you, I'm sure, are busy in continuous reskilling. This is going to be part of the uh, new paradigm. Reskilling yourself and your organization. Both, I think, are going to be critical. The last part in terms of organization paradigm to me is again something that I used to say earlier on. It was brought home to me as we built several new businesses, from being a DFI to being a bank, very narrow, to building all the new businesses. One key problem that we faced was you and a lot of CEOs try to do this. And I think they resist HR. Is to try to assume that an organizational structure is cast in stone. Your new businesses have to somehow fit into that organization structure. Please, I think, drill this into the CEO's mind that the organization structure is a living organism. It changes shape and character, and now particularly more than ever, because business contexts are changing, pivoting is happening all the time. So if you look at an organization structure as cast in stone, this is going to be disaster. So we need to have the recast on a continuous basis, or not a recast, I would say evolution on a continuous basis to look at what the shape of the organization should be. Last few comments. All this leads us to India with a 25-year growth runway. The Honorable Prime Minister talked about it. The Honorable Finance Minister talked about it just very recently. And this will be driven not only by all that they've talked about, that is infrastructure, manufacturing, new manufacturing, so on, but to me, critically by a new digital super cycle, which could add 25% to 30% to the economic growth. So if economic growth was assumed to be 10%, I would say that you can assume it is going to be plus 2.5% if the digital super cycle is firing on all cylinders. And all of you guys, in some way or the other, are already driving this. It's not only the new startups, but all of you guys. And of course, to add to this, there is going to be the sustainability super cycle. Everything that we are doing in terms of sustainability. To end, transformational leadership, I think, is the need of these times. Uh, the last 2 years, we have seen more transformation than the previous 25 years. The CEO now has to be a tech and an HR architect. Some time back, I used to say that the CEO has to be a tech architect. I will bravely and strongly say the CEO has to be a tech and HR architect, collaborating with both functions if he and his organization have to survive and compete. We all need to not be obsolete. That's where the reskilling and the relearning comes in. We need to continuously reskill ourselves, and we need to be prepared to live in a world of continuous disruptions. I'm sorry that I'm 2 minutes over time. Maybe, Sriram, you took 2 minutes away from me. So thank you. Again, I know that I've slipped by 2 minutes. Thank you for hearing me, and it was a delight talking to you. So you guys are the change agents. I mean, you guys make it happen. Please go and make it happen. And India rides on your shoulders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful session. Like always, your vision of the future has pointed us to the themes which very soon will become central to our business models and strategies going forward. It has been such a privilege to hear your thoughts on the meta landscape and the world of opportunities that beckon India and all of us. On behalf of NHRDN, I would like to take this opportunity to wish you and the team at National Bank for Financing, Infrastructure and Development the very best of luck. We are confident of the stellar milestones that NAPFID would be able to achieve under your inspiring leadership. Thank you again, sir, for today's session. Thank you so much.
Bye.